Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Dani Dunayczan is the cosmic coordinator at Free Range Psychiatry. She's also the host of the podcast titled Psychiatria. She holds a degree in behavioral neuroscience and is currently training to become a holistic health coach. Her passion for the mind-body spirit connection and her unending curiosity guide all that she does. She recently moved to Salt Lake City, Utah with her partner, where she enjoys the sunshine, rock climbing, and hiking in the mountains. Well, Dani, thank you for joining us here today. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. It's a pleasure to be on the other end of an interview.
I was hoping you could let us know a little bit about how you got started in the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and I think one that I kind of ask myself frequently because it's not linear, life is not linear. So I am in my mid-20s. I graduated with my undergraduate degree in behavioral neuroscience a couple of years ago now. I have always been interested in holistic health and mental health and alternative things and everything that falls into that realm. So the question for me has always been, okay, how do I share this with people? What is the avenue for me to do that? Because there are a lot of ways that can look like in the world. So where I found myself right now is working with this really cool organization called Free Range Psychiatry. So it's a holistic psychiatry practice. It's all virtual. The website's really good. I'll plug them there if anybody wants to check it out. It's just freerange.org. I am the cosmic coordinator there is my job title. So okay. I do everything from administrative work, helping schedule appointments, to kind of development things and new projects that we're working on, helping to brainstorm and design. And then I also get to do some really fun stuff with content creation, that being blog posts and my podcast, which is called Psychiatria. So that's another big part of what I do. And yeah, next steps for what I'd like to do, I'm actually starting a program to become a health coach that just started this week. So that's a new 2022 adventure for me. But yeah, as far as, more about how I got into all of this, I've had my own struggles with things and have seen people in my family struggle with mental health and physical health. My mom has been chronically ill with kind of an undiagnosed autoimmune type thing for my entire life. So that's really, I've only known her since she's been sick. So seeing her go through all of that and be in and out of the hospital and all of the mental health struggles that come with that, she's dealt with a lot of depression and then my dad being the engineer that he is and always trying to problem solve and fix, and then being super stressed out because he's trying to fix another person. And we all know that maybe not we all know, but you can't really do that. It doesn't really work. Yep. So and I'm an only child. So growing up, being in that environment and being a really empathetic person, feeling all of those things and experiencing that going on around me. And then probably also having my own innate tendencies. I started really in high school struggling with anxiety. I have some early memories that I understand now as anxiety that I don't think I knew were anxiety at the time. Nobody ever put that language to it. I had this one where I was sitting at my desk in our like my childhood home and trying to work on math. And I think I was probably like 6 or 7, and trying to do these math problems. It was like summer homework or something, and just being so frustrated and feeling like I couldn't do it, and just kind of sitting there. It was really, really difficult. And as I've learned more about anxiety, I was like, oh, that's part of this whole thing.
Yeah, you might have been having an anxiety attack.
Yeah, definitely. So in high school, really after I got into my first relationship, there's a lot of codependency stuff that runs through my family and in me as well. So that kind of, the relationship triggered a lot of those things. So when I was 15, I decided to go to therapy. It kind of, the anxiety became something where I knew that I needed help. And I knew that it was...
What was it that made you decide you needed help? What pushed it from just an annoyance to, I got to get help?
Yeah. Honestly, it was a conversation that my mom and I had. And, growing up, we're really, really close. And I would always talk to her about things that were going on. And like anytime something was on my mind, I would go to her and we would talk it through. She was really good at wanting to understand and all of that. And it kind of came to a point where I was talking to her about what I was feeling, and I was worried about all of these things. One time I actually wrote down all the things that I was worried about at like one particular moment, and it was like 120 things. It was, like multiple pages in this notebook. So we were having these conversations, and she would say like, well, just don't worry about it. Everything is fine. And anybody out there who knows what anxiety feels like knows that
it doesn't fix much.
No, you're like, well, I would love if I could just not worry about it, but that doesn't seem to be an option right now. So I remember her saying, she's like, I don't understand. I don't know how to help you. And I think then we both kind of knew like, okay, something from the outside needs to come into this. So that was really that like pivotal moment when I knew that I needed.
Did you get lucky? Did you find a good therapist right off the bat?
I did, actually. And I saw her up until this move. I had been in Michigan for, in high school. I was born and raised in Michigan and then just recently moved out to Utah. So basically my graduation from therapy with her and this move coincided because of state licensing regulations and stuff like that. But yeah, I was able to stay with her for, like 9 years or something. Wonderful. Like that. Yeah. Yeah. I credit therapy and her, that particular therapist, with a lot. I learned so much in that time. Like I would not be who I am or where I am without those experiences, for sure.
Well, I tell people you have to have 2 things to have a therapy to work at a bare minimum: someone that knows what he or she is doing and someone with whom you're comfortable. So that is not always easy to achieve. And those who get, a really good therapist and a really good match with their personality and their style on the first go round are very lucky. Yeah.
I have heard many stories from friends and people that I've met who didn't or maybe they found an okay therapist, or they had a therapist who just was telling them really bananas things. And I, feel super lucky to have and it was, because of insurance and whatnot, I had to go to my primary care doctor first, and my primary care recommended me to this therapist. So it was even just that connection happened to be there. And my therapist was new to town at that time, so I don't even know how my primary care knew about her. But yeah,
just
it was
a
serendipitous.
Fortunate series of events. Great.
Absolutely.
So what would you think? You said several times you wouldn't be the person you are and you learn so much, but are there some key life lessons or truisms that you think you learned from therapy that were different than what you had going in?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the more concrete concepts, things that like have names, is she taught me about mindfulness and introduced me to that whole world. One of the first things she taught me was the box breathing exercise, where, that was my first like therapy homework, was to sit in a chair and breathe and just feel my feelings. So I don't know, for anybody who doesn't know box breathing out there, it's you breathe in for 3 to 5 counts, hold it for that same number, exhale for that same number, hold again for that same number, and you just kind of go in the box. So tools like that, also journaling, she got me started in that. That's something that has been, has stayed with me, whenever I'm feeling kind of stuck or like I have a lot going on in my brain or something is,
it helps to get it out on paper.
Absolutely. Yeah. Helps to get it out on paper. Helps to slow my brain down a little bit, to put it into words and then see it there. And I always feel different. Whatever I've written out, I always feel different about it after I've written it. And the mindfulness too, like that's just a part of my daily life now. It's gotten to the point where whenever I start to feel anxious or something kind of throws me off balance, off center, my first reaction is to breathe. And that is
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's life-changing right there. Yep.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is. If I could pick just one thing, it would be that. And some of the other ideas that she taught me about that I learned in therapy were, really like feeling feelings. Given my childhood and everything that was going on and the kind of person that I am, I tended to just sort of push things down, like many of us do, and not really, anytime something would come up, it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay to feel things. I needed to fix it, to change it, to make it go away. So, and that was something that we worked on for our whole journey together, as I would go through different life experiences and things would happen, that like the feelings are okay. It's okay to just feel them. It's okay to let them go. Doesn't mean anything's wrong. Yeah, that was another big concept.
Yeah. And for some people, when, if we're raised by people who don't understand that, we don't learn that. Because we're not born knowing about our emotions or about breathing or about how the emotional state can provide very useful feedback and information. And it's just energy, so we don't have to be afraid of it. But if we're not taught that, and sometimes we're taught the exact reverse, your emotions are bad, dry it up, we're not going to tolerate that, you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about, all that kind of stuff. Then we shut it down and we cut ourselves off from a very useful source of information for navigating the world and relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point. And something that I think myself and a lot of people out there could benefit from remembering on a more regular basis. I think it's easy. It's easy for me to put a lot of pressure on myself and be like, okay, well, now you've like somebody cognitively told you these things, so now so just do it. But like you say, if you don't grow up in an environment where that's a part of, what you learn, then Like,
or if you've been programmed to believe the exact opposite, that your
right.
emotions are bad or they're hurtful or
Mhm.
wrong, you're wrong for having them, etc. Then there's a whole deconditioning process that needs to happen before you can establish that habit of the breathing and checking in and owning your emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a process for sure. It's a long, I think it's one that it doesn't really ever end. Like the work, with a capital W, it just is a lifelong thing, I think. Yeah.
Well, let's just take the last two words off that sentence and I'll agree.
Yeah.
It's not, I think, it just is. It's a lifelong process, right? You're always growing and changing. And,
absolutely.
Think about how much time, one of my favorite teachers is Dr. Michael Rice, and he talks about, think about how much time you spend learning to use your computer or your smartphone or your game system. And when they have a revision of the software, how you have to adapt. And sometimes you got to go take classes to, upgrade whether you're in electrical engineering or mechanical engineering, constantly learning. Well, why is it different for your brain?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. That's very true. Yeah, we're always kind of learning how to be human, how to live, and we're always growing and changing. And I think that's what makes us alive, Yeah.
So how did you get into the podcast business?
Yeah. So, honestly, it's something that I have wanted to do for quite a while. I listened to a ton of podcasts in high school and kind of all the classics, like anything that NPR did, This American Life, all that stuff. And I love talking to people. I'm a textbook introvert. And there are schools of thought on, whether people actually are introverts or extroverts, but I'm quite happy spending a lot of time alone. But I really love connecting with people in meaningful ways and having conversations about important stuff, and especially stuff that somebody else really cares about and is really passionate about. So I think it was something that was in my subconscious for a while. And then when I got involved with Free Range, Dr. Campbell, who's the founder and director of the practice, is always into ways to get this information out there, to teach people about all the different tools and the resources that we have to heal ourselves. We don't just have to go to the doctor and get a pill. There are many other ways that we can explore our humanity and grow and heal and do
skills
that.
To learn, yeah. Skills.
Absolutely.
To learn.
Yeah. Tools in the toolbox, arrows in the quiver, all that. So I just proposed to her one day that I was like, hey, what do you think about me starting a podcast? And here are the kinds of things that I would talk about. These are the kind of people that I'd want to interview. And she was all for it. So that's how I got into it. And it's been incredible.
How long have you been doing it now?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I started it, I think last summer. So it's been it's coming up on a year. Hasn't been quite a year yet. So
how often do you do episodes?
The podcast comes out every other week. I would love someday to make it a weekly thing or to have it more frequently, but that's what I can commit to right now. And I want it to be quality. Quality over quantity is where I'm putting the value on it right now. So, yeah.
So what is your stated purpose with the podcast?
Yeah. So the podcast is called Psychiatria, and Psychiatria is a Latin root of psychiatry, but Psychiatria actually means soul healer. And if you know anything about the way modern day psychiatry works and just the like 10-minute med checks and not really talking to people about everything that's going on in their life, it's so not soul healing these days. So being that I'm involved in the holistic psychiatry practice and that I believe in all of these things, I felt like, okay, soul healing, this is what so many of us, myself included, are looking for and working on. So what are the tools and the things that we have available to us in the world that can help us on that journey? Because I don't really believe that there's a person or a particular like professional that is a soul healer. You know, I think that we do that work for ourselves. So my mission with the podcast is to share that information with people in a way that feels really human and authentic and honest. I'm not trying to preach or give answers or solutions. It's conversations and information that can land with people, and they can choose how they want to incorporate it, or if they do or if they don't.
So what would you say is one of the more meaningful or surprising things you've learned since doing the podcast from some of your guests?
Yeah, I was thinking a bit about this in preparation for this conversation, and it's hard for me to pick out things from each individual episode because my brain is kind of lives in more big picture land. But I'll say that through every episode, I think where a lot of them have ended up is we just have to listen to ourselves. You know, a lot of these, I've interviewed acupuncturists, chiropractors, people who know a lot about polyvagal theory and massage therapists, a lot of bodywork stuff. Did a podcast on Brainspotting, which is super cool. Something that I've actually was a big part of my therapeutic journey. And kind of underlying all of that is like, your body has the resources to heal itself. You have what you need. All of these things are just trying to facilitate that and to help you tap into it, to help you bring it out, teach your body how to use it in this way, or, you know, to kind of unlearn the conditioning that we might have been taught. And that, I think the amount of times that comes up surprises me.
The amount of times what comes up?
That
the healing is all inside, and it's
that all of these different types of practices like really do have that thread in them. Which I think says something about me and perhaps what I need to learn. But
well, and it's also the idea behind functional medicine training. Mm-hmm. It's also one of the core concepts with anybody who's labeling themselves as an integrative practitioner.
Yep.
And it's something that, you know, I think most people would acknowledge that the allopathic medicine has gotten away from. The allopathic medicine practitioner has drifted toward thinking that it's the practitioner or the medication or the treatment that's doing the healing, when in fact, it's the body system, it's the energy system that's realigning that does the healing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's very true.
So who did you interview about Brainspotting?
Her name is Dr. Melanie Young. She is actually involved she trains therapists to do Brainspotting. So that's kind of how I got connected with her. But she's fantastic. She's, the episode actually continues to be one of the most popular episodes that is on the podcast that's published right now. It's really cool. Really cool stuff. Brainspotting is pretty fantastic.
And it has its roots in EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
That's right.
And it's one of those that, the more you dig into brain spotting, the more you understand that its creator, David Grand, just talks over and over and over again in his book about, we want to be in the tail of the comet. The patient is the head of the comet. And we just want to follow along, trusting that what that brain and body that are not separate, right, the brain body energy system, what it's doing will show you where you need to go or what the patient needs to do. And it's about following rather than, being creative and leading the patient somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things about it. In my personal experiences with brain spotting, that's something that my therapist would tell me frequently in the brain spotting session. She's like, okay, good. Notice that, see where it takes you. And I also love how simple brain spotting is. Like, it can get quite complicated, but the concept at base level, is where you look affects how you feel.
Yeah. And the complicated part is all the layers of traumas and beliefs and misnomers that we have lodged in us that, we're either using to run away from the problem or are covering up the problem. And so, if I try to think my way to the answer, I'm going to go off into the forest with no path and be lost real quick. But if I learn to read what the energy system is showing me, there's the path again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a really useful tool to kind of learn to trust your intuition and trust your body in that way.
Yeah. And for a lot of people that get introduced to that work, it's their first training at the fact that, number one, they've got an intuition. Number two, where is it and how do I, tune into it? And number three, how do I practice staying aware of that throughout the day in my life?
Yeah.
That's radical stuff for most people.
Oh my gosh. I know.
In the Western culture, I should say.
Sure.
In the Western mind. There are other cultures that have been much more attuned to the flow of energy and the body connection with the mind. But here in the Western culture, we have decided to elevate the conscious logical mind to the level of master and basically forget about that intuitive connection.
Right. We've taken our brains and put them all the way up here and forgotten about the rest of this lovely being, that we have. When I interviewed an acupuncturist, and we talked a lot about traditional Chinese medicine and that whole world of thinking is so much in line with all of the things that we're talking about. And there are so many cool, so many fun facts, I think, about traditional Chinese medicine, that I can pull from that episode. Like, they can treat the entire body just with the ear, just with points that exist in the ear.
Yeah. Auricular therapy.
Yeah. It's some acupuncturists just do that. They don't even touch the rest of your body. They just use your ear. And that was one that it surprised me a bit how easy it actually is to transition between going to an acupuncturist, receiving a treatment. They put the needles in different places and, they do their thing. And then actually learning to take that home with you and use those points, use those concepts, you can use them as acupressure points. You can just press on them or rub on them. There's things like moxibustion, which is just it's like a little, I don't really know what it is, but some sort of material that you light it so it gets really hot, but it just kind of smolders. It's not really on fire, and you can hold it over different points in your body and kind of just heats that one area. I was surprised at the amount of ways that we can take that home with us. And I think that applies.
And one of the easiest ones that's so accessible these days is the EFT tapping. Mm-hmm. And so many people on YouTube have wonderful, the person I refer to most often with that is Brad Yates, Yates, but there's acupressure.
Yeah.
And basically just breath work and acupressure to initiate the relaxation response in the body. And when you start pairing that with various negative thoughts or traumatic energies or stuck points in your emotional system, it's a phenomenal tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so incredible how many things are out there, like, and how creative we've gotten in all of the different angles that we can come at this from, that we can come at this healing and putting the power back in our own hands and enabling the body to do what it does.
Basically removing the roadblocks to the body healing itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something that I didn't quite understand before starting the podcast and having all these conversations. It's like, wow, there's a lot out there. And then it also makes it crazy that so much of the world and so many of the messages we receive just blatantly disregard that. It's easy, quote unquote, living in this world and surrounding myself with people that share the same thought process and the same beliefs, to forget that there is so much of the world that doesn't have exposure to this, and whether or not they would benefit from it or agree with it or whatever, if they did hear about it. It's just, there's so much diversity in the world and in all the ways.
Well, and what we encourage people to do in these podcasts and the Mind Shifter Radio we do is to always choose the filter that shows you the more positive outcome, or choose the filter that says everybody's doing the best they can in each moment with whatever resources they have. Or choose the filter that says when there's something that you would label as a tragedy or a disaster, don't focus so much on that. Focus on the helpers. Look for the helpers. There's always more good going on in the world than there is negative. Yeah, there's a lot of negative. This is a big world as far as we're concerned. And yet, if all that you experienced, if you stay stuck on a news feed or the YouTube of your favorite channel, or if the negativity was all there was, this planet, humanity would have ground to a halt or extinguished itself hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But what happens is there's a lot more good going on than there is negative. There's a lot more good that comes out of people in times of need than you're ever going to hear about in the general media.
Yeah, it's very true. That positivity is that perspective, is, I think at the bottom line, it's a survival mechanism. As you said, like, if we didn't have that, we probably wouldn't still be around. Yeah, but it's always there. And I think you're right. The more that we can tune into that and shift our perspective to see that, put our faith in that, trust that, part of our humanity and part of the humanity around us, is, we'll all be a little bit better off, I think. And we'll be a little bit better off. And I hope that's something too that shows up in my show, in my podcast, that it is empowering and hopeful. And if people can even shift that perspective of, okay, there is hope and there is light and there are good things going on here, onto their own selves, onto their own bodies, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. And it's essential to, there's one of my favorite things is to tell people to be gentle with themselves. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite teachers in that regard is a Jewish Buddhist grandmotherly type, Sylvia Boorstein, who said, whenever she's feeling upset, she puts her hand over her heart space and talks very gently to herself. She says, Sylvia, sweetheart, you're in pain. Take a few deep breaths, relax, calm down. Then we'll look at what's going on, and then we'll decide what to do. But for now, Timmy, sweetheart, you're in pain. And if I'm not willing to make the observation that there's more positive going on here than negative, and when I tap into that, it's going to help me overcome the negative, then I can get swamped with the negativity. I can buy the narrative that's out there that's so doom and gloom. And so I'm frequently telling people, just be gentle with yourself, whatever the situation.
Absolutely.
It's going to help you tap into the resources that you have to make a better outcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And isn't it funny how when we, I guess, kind of take a step back and just attend to that, just do that one simple action, how it can make such a big difference in how we handle things is wild.
Yeah, because we're literally creating our experience of life in each moment by where we're focusing our attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
if we shift over to focus to being gentle with ourselves and the positivity, we create a very different experience of life.
Yeah. I took a 6-week course in mindful self-compassion a few years ago now, but they talked about, that whole branch of mindfulness is very much focused on those ideas as well. And they kind of teach the same thing that you mentioned that Sylvia also does, is like, sweetheart, this is hard, take a moment. It's okay. And then give yourself what you need, address the situation. But taking that moment is so important. So important.
Yeah. And make it more than a moment, be generous with yourself.
Yeah. I think sometimes we only feel like we have a moment, but I hope in part of my future work as a health coach and whatever that looks like, that I can teach people, it's okay. Like, don't take just the bare minimum, take all of the time that you need. It's, that's really self-care.
Right. And when you were just saying, it can seem like we only have the moment. And the key to the accuracy of that statement is the word seem, because there's only this moment. And you can take as many of these moments as you need. And it's not, I can make it seem like there's no time, but I'm just generating that chaos and that running around or buzzing or hurrying inside myself. I'm the one creating it. Mm-hmm. And especially if there's an intense emotion, which means there's a lot of energy moving, which means there's a lot for me to learn and be aware of in this moment, especially when that happens, it's way too important to panic about. If I have a strong sense of emotion, and emotion is energy, and energy is information, and it's information about my life in the moment, it's way too important to rush through. So I could take that perspective and expand the moments I give myself to be gentle with myself and focus on the positive, and get an entirely different outcome. That if I buy the narrative that says, panic, hurry, there's no time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love those words that you put to it, to expand the moments that you do, right? Even if you feel like initially, oh my gosh, I only have this one moment, I am panicking and I must address it right away. It's to be gentle, to expand, to breathe into it, and as you say, the more that is coming up, the more there is to learn.
And it's way too important to panic about.
It's way too important. It's way too important. Yeah. Yeah. I'm it's interesting how this is all, I'm sort of putting myself in, I mean, past me's shoes of, okay, I feel panic coming up about something, and to recognize that is like, okay, this is a whole lot going on right now. So let's just be with that. It is quite a difficult skill to learn. At least for me, it has been.
Again, the bigger part of it is not learning the new skill. It's disrupting and deconditioning the years, or for some of us, decades of conditioning that say panic and go with the negativity. And so once that's interrupted, it's pretty easy. And I'll give you a couple questions to ask yourself. Anytime you have a negative emotion, take a nice deep breath, hold it for a couple seconds at the top, resist that exhale. So it's 10 seconds or more long, slow exhale. Turn your focus inside and ask yourself, how am I creating this emotion? It's the opposite of what the culture teaches. I'm having this emotion because she lied to me. I'm having this emotion because they just insulted me. I'm having this emotion because it's snowing so hard I may not make it to my meeting on time. So that question flips the table. How am I creating this emotion? And if that isn't that throw the door wide open, then try the question, what am I making this situation mean? Because that's the mechanism by which I choose the thoughts that I pour the mind energy into that creates the emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a tendency to ascribe meaning to a lot of or put inaccurate meaning onto things. So yeah, becoming aware of what one is actually doing. Our whole autonomy in our own experience, you know, it's a big thing to come to grips with, that we are really that much in control of our experience, and our lives. And, you know, you can get into the whole concept of the manifestation and synchronicity and all of that. And we potentially have a role in where our futures go. But like, we're pretty incredible. Humans are pretty incredible beings. And I am always working to find that balance between knowing how much power I have, knowing how much autonomy I have in creating this experience, and not panicking about that, not being like, oh my God, I'm going to mess it all up. I find I live a lot in those dualities.
Well, Michael Singer talks about how everything we see, every person we interact with, the chair we're sitting on, the building we're in, all of it began, according to our scientists, 13.84 billion years ago in the Big Bang. So all of the molecules, all the atoms, everything you see started back then. So everything you're experiencing and seeing has been 13.84 billion years in the making, in this flow of the creative force expanding. And just think about how silly it is for this mind that frequently forgets to pack the coffee and the briefcase and things to get to work and has to turn around, that this mind is going to say, hey, this isn't supposed to be happening, when it's been 13.84 billion years in the unfolding.
Yeah.
So if you balance that with the idea that, hey, I really am a creator, but I'm not a creator of the hurricane that swept through town or the traffic jam. I'm the creator of how I experience it. I'm the creator of my emotions. And when you balance those two, it gets a lot easier to navigate through your life and actually focus on the things you've got control over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When we can kind of draw those boundaries for ourselves, and say, this is like Byron Katie has this really wonderful kind of like way of asking questions about it, where it's like, is this my problem? Is this God's problem? The universe's problem? Like basically not my problem. And if it's not yours, like, then it's not yours. But if it is yours, then okay, own up to it,
right. And what are you doing with it?
Right. Yeah.
And if you believe your negative thoughts about it, then you're going to create suffering. And if you learn to question those thoughts and really see them deeply in all of their distortions, then they lose their power over you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I just looked down at the clock and realized we're pushing the limits here. So if there was, you've got a minute to give me some wrap-up thoughts or mention something about your work that we haven't mentioned yet, what would that be?
I suppose I'll just plug the podcast, and if anybody wants to, I have a lot of conversations that end up sounding something like this, where we just talk about life, the universe, and everything, and maybe we start on a particular practice, and then it just morphs into conversations of people like this. They'll maybe like what I'm doing too. You can find it anywhere, Spotify, Apple, whatever, Psychiatria. And also, I just want to say how much fun this has been to have this conversation with you and get to be the interviewee instead of the interviewer. It's been a joy and an honor.
I'm glad you think so. And I appreciate your taking the time to share with us. And I look forward to, I think I said it's tomorrow. I'm going to try and interview one of your compatriots there in Free Range Psychiatry or freerange.org. And Dani, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I look forward to following your podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, you're very welcome. Until next time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.